Now we're excited to invite up on the stage Nick Akins, who is the chairman, president, and CEO of American Electric Power. And he's going to take some time to talk about utility transformation and its impact on communities. So please join me in welcoming Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So I apologize for being late. Something about these storms that came through, we were at 146 mile per hour headwinds, so it took me a little while to get here from Columbus this morning. But I'm happy to be here, obviously. I do really enjoy the music theme. I don't know if you've read a little bit about my biography. I'm on the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'm a drummer as well. So the art side is obviously important, but we're making a transition in this industry that's really focused on moving ahead with our customers and focusing on the customers. And that brings about a lot of issues associated with the transition of the industry. There's no question today, and we, as you may not know about AEP, AEP is one of the largest utilities in the country. We serve 11 states, including Texas, and certainly we have solar and other types of products in 32 states, actually. So we're very focused on making sure we address consumers' needs, and that really drives some big issues for us. You know, as a wires company, particularly in Texas, I'll just give you an example of where the regulatory situation is sort of colliding with where the consumers are wanting to go. You may have read Utility Dive, I think it was today or yesterday, about a situation in Texas where we went to two different, one was a town, the other was another establishment where energy storage was the best option, clearly the best option by far, over generation and transmission. Well, as you might know, legislation in Texas precludes the utility from being involved with what could be perceived as generation. And I can tell you that it's becoming more and more convoluted from a distribution side of things to determine what is a resource, what is a generation resource versus what is not. And certainly it drives a wedge in the thinking of, from a regulatory standpoint, of how to deal with these competitive markets in that kind of context. You know, in many cases, the energy storage was the best solution, so we waited a year and a half, made a filing at the PUCT for an exception, and waited a year and a half, and we were dismissed without prejudice so we could come back. But they established a rulemaking, which I think is great. They need to establish that to really determine what the role of the utility is in terms of the advancement of technology. In our integrated regulated jurisdictions, which are 10 and a half, we're in both sides of Texas, but those jurisdictions we have no issue, but certainly for those in competitive markets, there is an issue about that separation. But the customer is not separating that. There's no decision process where a customer is saying, I'm going to worry about the way the industry is structured for me to make my decisions about how I want to move forward from an energy supply perspective. And I think that's critical for us to think about, not only from a company perspective, but also from a regulatory perspective. There's no question that today that convolution is occurring with several different technologies. And I think many times utilities are seen as sort of backward, dinosaurs, all that kind of stuff. And but you really find out if you dig deeper, we're investing directly in many of these new technologies. We're also partners with many of the technology providers, and they'll say to you that they really need that scope and scale. They need the technology deployment. They need to be able to really focus on how the integration works with the system and really drive the solutions for customers in a better fashion. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We're working with a technology that was really around optimizing the efficiencies across a broad spectrum of commercial customers, and I'll give you an example in the Target store. I was in the Target store observing this technology that we had partnered with and actually invested in, and we watched customers as they were shopping, and the lighting load comes down by 50%, and the shoppers, they don't bat an eye. They continue shopping the way they had before, no problem at all. And there's only so many times you can do that during a shopper's customer experience, but it tells you a lot about the customer psychology of what can be really built upon and provide capacity value, which is tremendous for us in the future. And think about the aggregation of all of that together across the broad spectrum of consumers that we have. I was at a session last night in Washington, D.C. with some policymakers, and there was a lot of discussion about what happens with technology going forward, how is it deployed, what is the structural mechanisms that enable that to happen, and we, the utilities, are in a huge transformation that really is defining how that's going to work. Smart cities is a perfect example. Columbus won the Smart Cities Challenge. AEP was obviously a big part of that. We're $186 million of the $500 that's dedicated to that project at this point in time. Really is focused on the advancement of smart grids, the focus on charging stations, all those types of applications, smart street lighting, those types of activities. And certainly when you think about that, how is it readily deployed? What is the drawing line between what we do versus others? And I can tell you that the scope and scale and the ability to get things done from a project perspective, the cities have really looked at us to provide that kind of leadership. And as long as we're at the forefront of technology with our customers, we're in great shape to maintain that relationship, because the majority of our customers look at us as really the expert when it comes to energy that they may actually want to use. And so we have to be there to do it, but to do that, we've got to be at the forefront of technology. That's why we invest directly in many of these technologies. I'll give you an example of another technology that we're focused on. It really is around energy storage, also around renewables, renewable deployment, all those types of activities. But when you think about volt-var transformation, when you think about all the activities on the grid itself, it has tremendous value. But then you start to look at big data analytics and be able to tell when a transformer will fail before it fails. If you know that beforehand, you can certainly improve the customer experience associated with that. Those big data analytics solutions are going to be incredibly important to us and have been. We're just now getting to where we really understand what data we have and how to use it to improve the customer experience. When you think about some of the analytics and the technologies involved, I grew up as an engineer. In fact, I started in Northwest Louisiana. I worked in Texas for 10 years, and it was really centered on system dispatch, generation, transmission, distribution. And I really believe that even the Texas legislation is antiquated at this point, because it really is centered on that notion of generation, transmission, and distribution, and lines of demarcation of who can do what. Well, the customer is not going to care about that. And when you think about some of the issues that we're dealing with today, it is really around the convolution of all these technologies, the ability to aggregate data and accumulate efficiencies to be able to answer customers' needs in terms of whatever use they want to use. And that's really important for us as we go forward, and really important from a policy-making decision. So for smart cities, for example, it really is a discussion of around how can we deploy these technologies and really improve the social awareness of not only the use of energy, but also improve society as a whole. You know, the original social network was the electric utility industry. There's no question. You can ask anyone who's lost power for any period of time. You know, for those of us in the industry, after 3 days, you're in trouble these days, maybe even less. And I think it's important to realize that when you go through the process of an outage type of activity, and we just now have employees of ours, line personnel that are coming back from Puerto Rico. There are Puerto Ricans that have been out without power for over 6 months. That would never be acceptable here on the mainland. And for us to think about the social network capability, and I'm sure you heard Tom Fanning talk about cybersecurity, and Pat Vincent-Colon talked about smart grid applications. We have to bring all that together in a social network and social structure that not only brings scope and scale, but also provides universal access to everyone in our community of the benefits of what we're doing. So Smart Cities Columbus is centered on focused on an underdeveloped part of the city to provide not only the support from autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, because when you think about it, we can improve society not only in the large urban areas, but also in other parts of the country by electrification. By moving toward electrification and having autonomous vehicles, people can maintain jobs, they can go to health care, and certainly be able to have the transportation to do that, that's extremely important. We have an opportunity to change the nature of the urban setting, but also the opportunity to bring rural areas closer to the urban settings as well, just by virtue of electric vehicles and what we're able to do there. There's no question that as we move forward with the technologies that are being deployed today, it's a whole new realm. It's generation, transmission, distribution, but also the customer experience and technology that's going to have a tremendous impact, and it's really a new resource. We have the largest transmission system in the country by far. It's a great optimizer of resources associated with renewables. We have the largest proposed wind power project in the nation, 2,000 megawatts, our wind catcher project. It happens to have a little generation interconnect that's about 350 miles long, 765 kV line, but it's a large project. Those are the kinds of projects we'll be able to put in place to not only optimize among the country in terms of resources and using high capacity resources from various parts of the country, but also look at it on the consumer end and make determinations of how much efficiency gains we can get from the aggregation of customers, their use patterns, but at the same time be able to improve the quality of life for people who are in urban settings, but also in terms of our customers in general. It's clearly an opportunity for this industry and also an opportunity for us to come together from a policy-making perspective to make the changes that really are forward-looking. These technologies, we're involved with an international effort. We're the only North American utility involved with an international effort that's really like a shark tank of sorts that goes through various technologies. We've culled down to 200 different technologies from around the world. These are energy-related technologies. We'll move forward and cull that list down even further, and we actually could invest or be able to partner with particular technology providers. These are real opportunities for us to redefine the customer experience. As we go forward, this is going to be a part of our business on an ongoing basis. We have to have the culture, certainly, that supports that, an innovative, agile culture and a diverse culture that can really focus on these nascent changes that are occurring, but adopt them very quickly to the benefit of our customers. As we move forward, there's no question that our industry is moving toward a cleaner energy economy. And I get the question all the time about, we are a large coal utility as well, but it really is deeper than that. For investors that want to make an investment in improving from a clean energy perspective, an investment in AEP is really focused on moving forward and looking forward to the new technologies, and that's why renewables are a big part. Certainly some natural gas to support renewables, but the technology piece is clearly important. We're over a 110-year-old company that has all different types of patents for different types of technologies in the electric utility industry. We've done that for years and years, but we're trying to capture that and change the culture to be open, collaborative, and move forward from a forward-looking perspective to ensure that we do have that agility and do have that ingenuity to be able to provide those customer solutions in the future. I really believe that as we move forward, we're moving away from so much of an engineering culture, which I'm an engineer, I can say this, so from an engineering culture, but engineering and artists and marketers and those types of backgrounds so that we can mold it together for a better experience for our customers. I've been involved with many efficiency lean activities, Six Sigma lean activities, where young people would come to the table and after more seasoned employees try to evaluate how a process can be changed, a young employee would say, well, I have an app for that. And I think what we're doing today is, obviously deploying smart meters, doing all those kinds of things, but that's just having the iPhone without the apps, and now we're developing the apps. And actually, the aggregation of these technologies enable us to crowdsource resources, if I could say that, with actually looking at different types of efficiencies, but also different types of distributed generation resources, all those types of things that are connected to the distribution grid. So if you look at the way the industry is changing, large central station generation facilities are the most risky investment that we could make. A 40, 60, 80-year investment that's billions of dollars that takes years of time certainly is a high-risk investment, and it's really very difficult to bet against technology. It's very difficult to make that bet because of the aggregation of all these inherent capabilities that are enabling in the grid today and eventually with the consumers and the psychology of consumers. So that's why we're focused on many wires-related activities. Also, we continue to focus on generation-related activities, but when you're going to see more compartmentalized, more distributed. Commercial customers certainly are focused on having and we already have a design for this, a trailer with a small, it's a new technology of natural gas, we won't get into that, but also in combination with solar and renewables to solve a commercial establishment. Those are clear indications of the future, and to be able to aggregate all those together is just going to be amazing. It really is for this industry in the future. So I hope I've at least talked a little bit about some of the issues that we deal with, but the main issue for us is to think about what we want from a policy objectives. If we're trying to reduce carbon emissions as quickly as possible, and if we're trying to make advances from a clean energy standpoint and make our certainly our resources more diverse, this is the time to really be involved with this industry and to be able to focus on the regulatory solutions that enable that to happen. So I'll stop there, and I'll certainly take any, do I have time for questions at all, or no? Oh, I threw him for a loop, I think. Too bad there's not a drum set. I'll just go play that. That's my favorite. Piano is another percussion instrument I can't play very well. Yeah. Yes?
The question is coal dead?
Coal is not dead, and I really believe that certainly from a diversity perspective, it's important for coal to be a part of the portfolio going forward. The issue really becomes how are we going to really address the technical solution around carbon capture and storage? And so coal will remain a part of the portfolio. But as we go forward, you're going to see, again, more distributed solutions, and generation will become much different than it is today. The question is, will coal be one of those distributed solutions? Nuclear may be at some point, certainly with small modular nuclear reactors, but you've got to solve the carbon issue for coal-fired generation for it to effectively move forward. And for us to make an investment in a coal-fired generation facility today is really very difficult, if not impossible. And so you're going to see a continued reduction in the amount of coal that actually serves this country. Not dead, but certainly waiting for a solution. And I'll venture to say we supported Waxman-Markey, if you remember the legislation, probably it was several years ago, and we supported it because there were clear demonstration projects around carbon capture and storage to try to keep coal in place. But it didn't happen, and I just wonder where we'd be today if we had really focused on those kinds of solutions back then.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're unfortunately out of
That's
time.
fine. That's fine.
No,
Yeah.
I know that there are a lot of questions. So if you have questions for Nick, is it okay if we get some questions via Slido and send them to you?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yep.
All
Well,
right.
thank you very much. I
Yes.
appreciate being here.
Yes. Thank you so much, Nick.
Yeah.
That was excellent.
Thank you.